the 2012 Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series, live from Georgia Public Broadcasting, a special Charter School Amendment Forum.
I'm Donna Lowry, education reporter for WXIA-TV 11 Alive. We'd like to welcome our viewers, our listeners on GPB Radio, and our live studio audience to the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series, originating from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting. This is the Charter School Amendment Forum. The question of whether or not the state should be able to create a charter school commission to approve and fund local charter schools will appear on the ballot in November. Representatives on both sides of the issue are here to discuss this controversial topic. Now, let's meet the panelists. They are in alphabetical order. Jan Jones is the Speaker Pro Tem of the State House of Representatives. She authored the legislation that allows voters to decide if the state should be able to approve local charter schools. Next is Kelly McCutcheon. He is president and CEO of the Georgia Public Policy Foundation and founder of the Tech High Charter School. Alvin Wilbanks is the superintendent and CEO of the Gwinnett County School System. And our final panelist is Valerie Wilson, president of the Georgia School Boards Association. We have the amendment language we're going to show you a little bit, but we want you to also know that joining us this evening is Maureen Downey. She's an education writer for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and also runs the AJC's Get Schooled blog. Maureen will be taking your questions via Twitter and the GPB website. So to send in your questions, tweet us using hashtag APCCharterTalk or go to gpb.org and click Watch Live. Now, here is the format for today's discussion. First, each panelist will have 60 seconds to share their viewpoint on the charter school issue. Then we will start the discussion focusing on 5 topics: state versus local, funding and choice, achievement and measurement, innovation and regulation, and sports activities, if we get to that, and more. Throughout the discussion portion, we will turn to Maureen Downey for your social media questions. So, finally, each panelist will have 30 seconds to share their final thoughts on this issue. Before we begin our discussion, let's take a look at how the Charter School Amendment question came to be on the ballot. On this day in March of 1995 at Cobb County's Addison Elementary, the students dressed up as storybook characters, but had no idea of the real-life story playing out concerning their school.
With the charter, we have a chance to say, this is what we believe that the school should be doing.
Addison would become the first charter school in Georgia, a fact it still touts on its website.
8 times 6.
Addison's ability to make the move came after Georgia lawmakers passed the Charter Schools Act of 1993, patterned in many ways after charter school laws in Minnesota. At first, the law only allowed for conversion charters. Schools like Addison established public schools that could apply for charter status. About 10 years later came the law to allow for startup charter schools. And in August of 1999, Oglethorpe Charter School opened in Savannah as the first of its kind in Georgia.
What law is that? Third law, which is equal and opposite.
A year later, Drew Charter School became the first startup charter in Metro Atlanta and continues to thrive, recently winning the Georgia Charter of the Year award from the Georgia Charter School Association. But success with charter schools has proven rocky for some startups, some that opened to fanfare and hope later closed because of management issues or underperformance or lack of funding. Others never opened at all.
In the last couple of years, just about every startup charter school application in local boards of education has been denied.
Perceived resistance or reluctance from local boards to approve charter petitions led in 2008 to a law creating the Charter School Commission.
So there are quite some glaciers in Austria.
Gwinnett County Schools, along with 6 other Metro Atlanta systems, sued, saying the commission approved charter petitions they had turned down and moved state funding from the school districts to charter schools.
We firmly believe that Georgia Charter Schools Commission is unconstitutional. This is not an anti-charter school lawsuit. The Gwinnett County Board of Education already has approved 2 successful charter schools.
Quite frankly, it's disappointing that school districts are making this about money and power and control. And at the end of the day, it should be about parents and children, and those are the ones who need to have the power and the control.
In May 2011, the Georgia Supreme Court ruled the commission unconstitutional, prompting protests and eventually leading to putting the commission issue before voters this coming November 6th. Now let's get started. Each panelist will have 60 seconds to share their viewpoint. By random selection, Valerie Wilson goes first. Ms. Wilson.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here today to talk with you about this charter amendment. It's extremely important for me to make sure that the viewing audience and the citizens of the state of Georgia understand that local school boards and the Georgia School Boards Association has a long-standing history of support for charter schools. We understand that charter schools offer a wonderful complement to what we do in public schools, and sometimes, because of the flexibility that they have, can support the work that we are doing in our local districts. Many of the boards of education that work with us are actually charter systems. They have approved charters throughout the state of Georgia. Now, for those school systems who haven't, many of those school systems have never had a charter application come before them. But for those who have, we have been able to work with them. So today, I hope that this conversation will help people to understand that local school boards and Georgia School Boards Association are not anti-charters. We really are supportive.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Kelly McCutcheon, it is your turn for your view.
Well, Donna, I want to thank you and the Atlanta Press Club for hosting this debate. This is a critical issue. In fact, when economic development is concerned, the public education system in Georgia is more important than traffic congestion. It's more important than health care. But in addition to trying to create jobs, this is an issue of economic opportunity for our citizens. If a child is at risk of not graduating, they're probably going to be struggling for the rest of their lives. We believe all children are different, they learn differently, and they need different options. This amendment will give them those options and empower parents to do what's right for their children. This is not something out of the blue. It's been done in 32 states, and we've had it in place before. We had it in place for 3 years, and it had great results. We took more disadvantaged students, provided a better education to them, and we did it at less cost to the taxpayers.
All right, thank you very much. Next is Alvin Wilbanks. Your thoughts?
Thank you. Thank you for providing this opportunity. We certainly are not opposed to charter schools in any way. However, Amendment 1 is not so much about charter schools, and that's why I oppose it. I oppose it, first of all, because it does expand state government. It will create a dual school system when we already have 2 agencies that do that job quite well. In addition, it will be a costly duplication of services at a time when this state cannot afford to pay for things twice. Governor Deal has just asked the agency heads to reduce state budgets 3%. This adds to the state budget, and regardless of what is said, it is going to cost education dollars. In addition, the ballot language is extremely vague. More importantly, it is misleading, and I think the preamble just added to that. For those reasons, I oppose Amendment 1.
Well, thank you very much. And our final statement will come from Jan Jones.
Thank you. Well, good evening. I am delighted to be here tonight to share a longer conversation with Georgians about providing our young people with more opportunities so that they can succeed. These tuition-free, open enrollment public charter schools give parents and teachers more choices. The question tonight is, are we satisfied with the status quo? Only 2% of students in Georgia have the option of attending a public charter school, but yet we rank 47th in our graduation rate. You know, teachers are working their hardest, but teachers and parents know that one size does not fit all, and every child doesn't learn the same. It is important that we continue to move Georgia forward so that we're known as a state with a well-prepared workforce, not a state with a higher dropout rate than even Mississippi. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's all the time we have, the viewpoints at this point. Now let's get into the issues. We'll start with the topic at the crux of the charter school debate, state versus local control. Who should have the final say on the approval of charter schools, local school boards or the state? And let's get started. I think we're going to go to you, Alvin Wilbanks, first. Who should have?
Thank you. Certainly, we believe that the locally elected school board should have the authority over education at the local level. They should be the ones that make that decision, and they should be the one that continues to make that decision in the future.
All right. Mr. McCutcheon?
Well, I would like to address that. I have great respect for school board members. You know, that is a thankless job that is critical, and thankfully we have a lot of school boards doing a great job. But it's not a perfect world. We do have some school boards that are dysfunctional, and we have some schools that are great but aren't serving the needs of all our students. So in a court system, you have an appeal. We're asking for an appeal to a professional board at the state level to make sure the facts were right in an objective way. When they were in existence, they heard 56 appeals. They only approved 16. So they were not wantonly approving and overruling local school boards. But more importantly, the Founding Fathers believed that they did not believe in concentrated power. And the best way to avoid concentrated power is to give it to the people. This is not a state takeover. This is devolving that power to parents. Parents are going to have the ability to take their dollars to go to a charter school, and if they're not happy, they can go back to their traditional school.
Okay, I want to give Ms. Wilson a chance to weigh in on this.
You know, local school boards should have the authority to approve or not approve charter schools. But in the state of Georgia, we have the opportunity for an appeals process already. That is through the State Board of Education. So when a local school board denies a charter application, they can appeal to that state school board. I did some checking last night, and authorizers across the state for state charter schools, their local education boards, state agencies, different organizations. And when you look at the independent charter boards, there really aren't that many. There are some, but for the most part, local school boards or state board educations have been the primary authorizers for charter schools in this country and in this state.
All right. Ms. Jones.
Well, and I have to say I agree. The problem is we unfortunately had a court decision in 2011 that we all know greatly curbed the state's ability to approve nonprofits to open independent charter schools. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here now. And you're right, 32 other states do allow the state or other authorizers in addition to the local school boards. That's what we're trying to do with this amendment today, is to preserve what the state has been doing for the last, I guess 11 or 12 years, which is allow for an appeals process that we are in great jeopardy of not having. And we know that without an alternate authorizer, we simply won't have these options for students.
All right. Well, we've asked for people to send in their questions, and we want to go to those now. Maureen Downey.
Yes, and we are actually getting a lot of questions via the website, but this question came in advance of the panel. Molly in Atlanta wants to know, locally elected school boards in charge of local tax dollars already can and do approve charter schools statewide. Why do we need an added layer of expense from the state to overrule locally elected authorities in charge of local tax dollars? And on top of that, another question that came in, that similar question said, Jan Jones, as a conservative, how can you support creating another layer of government at a time when our current agencies are underfunded and cutting their budgets?
Representative Jones.
Well, which question to answer first? The first is, the reality is that school boards simply are not approving them. That's why we passed a bill in 2008 to put more organization behind it and make sure that they had the funding. Unfortunately, the court decision greatly curbed that. We only have 46 independent charter schools out of several thousand schools in Georgia today. Fewer than 2% of Georgia students have this option. You know, you can't get more local than allowing a parent to vote with their feet. And I'll just point out, for example, in Gwinnett County, how local does it feel in a county larger in population than 5 individual states for a parent to be able to cast one vote every 4 years, 3 times in their child's entire tenure in high school and elementary school, to vote for 1 of 5 school board members? It feels a lot more local if a parent can have an option.
I want to give Superintendent Wilbanks a chance to talk about this.
Well, first of all, I thought that was a very good question. School boards do approve charter school applications. As a matter of fact, there are over 100 charter schools operating in the state today, and that doesn't count the charter system schools. There are a large number of those in each system. Fulton's just came in. But I think when you get down to the choice issue, that's a very much overplayed thing. There are a lot of choices people have. But if you really think that the parents have the choice for charter schools, you really need to look again. This is just simply not the case. Now, some they do, but as a general rule, the rank and file charter school, there's a lot more parental involvement in traditional schools, a lot more. And I contend that the choice issue is one that gets overplayed. The real issue here is about who is going to who is going to fund these schools and who's going to profit from them. And I think we really need to look at, across this country, the schools that are run by EMOs or CMOs, and they're the ones that has the choice. The ballot language, for example, talks about
You have to break
that.
down EMOs and CMOs for people.
Okay, EMOs are educational management organizations. They come in and run a school. Charter management organizations basically do the same thing, that for a fee, okay? And that those are the ones that really, along with the person that wanted to start that charter school, they're the ones that really run that school. And you can say all you want. All you have to do is look at them, school for school, and you'll find some where, yes, the parents did come out en masse and wanted to do this, but they are few and far between.
I've got to let Kelly talk on this.
Thank you. First, let me talk about this dual state bureaucracy. First of all, when the commission was first started, the Department of Education with existing staff handled everything for the first year. Then the commission, they have 7 unpaid commissioners, and they had a staff of 4 people for the entire period. Now, the Department of Education is already handling hundreds of charter schools. They can handle more. There's no need to have extra bureaucracy, and it's misinformation. The state of Georgia is not running the schools. They're authorizing the schools. So there's the local boards are, at the school level are running the schools. Now, privatization is absolute myth because every charter school, just like every public school, has to be a nonprofit. They cannot be run by a private company. And these local community members that are elected to the board at the charter school can hire and fire at will. At Tech High, we contracted out everything we could. If we could find somebody to do the job better and more efficiently, we took advantage of it so we could put more money into the classroom to the most important variable in education, which are teachers. So this is, the control is with the local elected board, not with some for-profit company.
But we have had the for-profit companies come in and fail in Georgia. Go ahead.
They're waiting to come in big time. There is an undercurrent across this nation to do basically 3 things. 1, privatize. 2, defund and dismantle public education.
Privatization.
There's billions of dollars to be made in this charter school movement.
And you disagree?
Oh, absolutely. It really is scaremongering to scare people. You know, Gwinnett County Schools contracts out $850 million over the next 5 years for private contracts to construction companies to build schools. They purchase privately produced textbooks. Public schools employ the services of private industry every day. What charter schools do, public charter schools, they hire public school teachers, which make up about 75% or 80% of the cost. It's that remaining 25 or 20% that they contract out to do it more cheaply so they can have more funding in the classroom where learning occurs.
And we know that this issue is all about the money, and so we're kind of getting into this next area of funding and choice issues with all of this. You say against this amendment that you like the idea of charters, but not the idea of an alternate authorizer on all of this. But if that's true, why are so few charter schools approved at the local school level, do you think?
Can I just say?
Sure.
Local boards of education do have the authority, and the state board as well. The state board's authority is not going to go away, and there's been this fear factor that's been put out there. I know people are saying that if this amendment doesn't pass, then there is this fear that charters will stop being authorized in the state of Georgia, and there's this suit, this fictional suit that's going to be filed that will take charters away from us. That's not going to happen. The State Board of Education will continue to approve charter schools. Local boards will continue to approve charter schools. But what we have to understand is that school systems that are experiencing cuts, and I can tell you in the city of Decatur, I've been on the board for 10 years. In the city of Decatur, over the last 10 years, we have lost $6 million in funding to our public school system. We're currently a charter system. We spend every year looking at budgets and trying to determine what we can and cannot afford in our buildings and balance that from what parents are saying they want to continue to see happening in our buildings. When a local startup charter comes to us and says, we want to be a charter school, that hasn't happened so far, but if they were to do that for any school system, you've got to look at your budget. You've got to determine where those dollars are, because an extra building, extra responsibilities are there. I can only assume that in some of these systems, when they look at it, in addition to the other guidelines and criteria that has to be in that application, funding is one of the areas that they have to consider. So I'm sure that that is a part of it.
And I got to ask on this side, how do you justify asking for new schools in the form of charters when we already have underfunding in the state of Georgia in education?
Well, we're a growing state, and so as more students are coming in, there's more demand for new schools opening. If you need a new building and 10 or 15 students go to a charter school, you don't have to build that building. The fact is, Donna, is that what everyone agrees on, the funding for these new state charter schools, it's going to be 62% of the traditional public schools. So if you're educating some kids, getting a good quality education at less money, there's more money for everyone else. So there's no need to be concerned about this. The funding is going to be lower than 97% of all the other public schools. So I don't know where this profit is. I think if there's profiteering, if we want to look for where the profits are, looking at the rest of the schools in Georgia that are getting paid much, much more to educate our children. We believe in efficiency, but there's going to be plenty of money to go around, and I know the General Assembly has funded charter schools from a separate line item, and they intend to continue to do that.
So fully funding, the fact that we haven't had QBE fully funded, we've had austerity cuts, yet we still can bring in some more schools.
Absolutely. In fact, in Gwinnett County, they're going to grow, I believe, by 1,000 students this year. Georgia continues to grow, although at a lower rate. So these students overall won't add to the number of schools that we would already be building in Georgia. But when you say fully fund, remember, they're only going to receive an average of 62% of what our traditional schools will receive. It's actually a way of cutting the cost of education without cutting the quality of education.
I need to serve as a fact check here for the esteemed Speaker Pro Tem and Mr. McCutcheon here. First of all, this is right out of House Bill 797 that you all passed, which really talks about funding for schools. First of all, there are 15 state charter schools today. There's about 15,000 students. The virtual charter school has about 10,000 of those, has about 2/3. So there are 5,000 students spread over the other 13 charter schools. So when they give you these percentages, the virtual charter is about 62%. But when you move to the combined brick and mortar and add that, that ups that percent, I believe 82% of what it is. So just a fact check here to make sure.
I would like to clarify that. You're absolutely right. There's the virtual schools, which are funded at about half. And then there's the brick and mortar.
About $4,600.
The bricks and mortar, of which there's only, what, I think you know the numbers, 5,000 students. Right. They will be funded, I know I wrote the formula, on average at less than students in every school system but 2 out of 180 school systems. So that's just the bricks and mortar schools. The funding will be low, but what's interesting to me is that the School Board Association, the Superintendents Association, have tried to make this about the greater malaise of our economy. And we all know that. our constituents, the parents in your school system, the parents in your school system have less money. So therefore the state and local school boards do too. But this is a minute amount of funding that we added to the education budget. We didn't subtract, and it has nothing to do with the fact that we have a poor economy now. In fact, we spend more on dual enrollment students, which the state gives every high school student the opportunity to take classes at colleges and technical schools, and we fully pay for it. Okay. That costs more than what we're talking about here.
Donna, I'm going to let Valerie Wilson answer this, and then we're going to get to Maureen.
Can I just say, we've just finished talking about money, all this money that's there and the adding of money. We haven't had money added to our budget in years in the City Schools of Decatur, outside of us having to just this past year raise our millage rate in order to maintain services with certain programs within our system. There hasn't been any magical dollars added. If anything, we've had to look at like other systems, and I hear these stories as I go across the state of having to lose dollars. We have probably about 70 school systems in this state who are really operating in deficit. So maybe there were dollars that were found, but maybe those dollars that were found were somehow dollars that left those systems. But it's real important that we leave here today because we're talking about the dollars. We're talking about dollars. That this amendment, and I want to go back to this amendment, not a debate on whether charters are better or charters cost more or charters cost less. This amendment is about who will make the decision about public dollars, and an appointed commission that has no relationship whatsoever to taxpayers who do not answer to them. I answer to the taxpayers in the city of Decatur. This appointed commission will not answer to taxpayers. This appointed commission will be making decisions on those tax dollars. That is what citizens need to make a decision on.
Okay, I know we have the other side on this. I do want to get to Maureen. You'll have some time to get your stuff in. We want to hear, excuse me, what you have to hear, what you're hearing from
viewers. Well, we've gotten about 18 questions online, and several of them do deal with the finances. Marcus asks, it's my understanding that these new charter schools would receive in excess of $2,000 more per student than existing public schools. How is this warranted? But more importantly, how does the state intend to pay for it? Doesn't this reduce existing funding for public schools, which already struggle to support art and athletic programs?
All right.
I'm happy to answer. And first I want to address, they are answerable to the state taxpayers. In fact, the state taxpayers are answerable to the funds that we send to local school systems, even though we're 47th in our graduation rate and have very little to do with that. Those dollars, state taxpayers pay for them. In fact, the state taxpayer provides more in funding to local school systems on average than local school system property tax dollars do. But these are a very modest amount of dollars that the state is offering. The question is not just the dollars. The question is, are we satisfied with being 47th in our graduation rate, and do we want to offer more opportunities like dual enrollment, like the virtual school classes? The state today spends $6 million a year offering over 12,000 12,000 classes were taken by Georgia students. I don't hear anyone complaining about that. What the issue is with the superintendents and the school boards is, you're right, who gets to approve it? The reality is they weren't being approved prior to the state becoming more active in approving them. And we know that the constitutional amendment doesn't even mention an amendment or a commission. The constitutional amendment purely would allow the state to go back to the way it had been for the last 11 years as a complement to school systems and an appeal who simply won't provide students with other options.
Did you want to answer this?
Yeah, if it doesn't mention a commission.
It doesn't.
Who is going to do it then?
We can put the language up if you want to see
it's
it.
under the authority of the state.
This is part of the real issue here, is the misleading language that's in the preamble as well as the ballot question. It talks about local communities. that conjures up in people's mind at least a sizable portion of a community, or maybe even the majority. You can be from out of state and do that. A charter management company can do that. Find somebody that wants to do it, and that's how a lot of them start.
Well, let's clarify it for our viewers. Shall the Constitution of Georgia be amended to allow state or local approval of public charter schools upon the request of local communities?
And that's
Where's
my
the confusion?
point.
Okay.
The confusion is you can already do that. Yes. You can already appeal to the local Board of Education. If the local Board of Education turns the request down, it can go to the State Board of Education. Well, they can either approve it or they can deny it.
Well, then you should be for the constitutional amendment, because that's all it affirms. It simply says in the language, and it was vetted through a bipartisan group, that the state could go back to the same position it had for the last 11 years, and that it would have the authority to also approve these, just as we had before.
In other words, are you saying there will be no commission, charter school commission?
Well, that's just that's under the authority of the State Board of Education. The Constitution doesn't allow the State Board of Education to give that authority away.
Madam, I believe you need to go back and read that
I wrote it
again.
I wrote it.
Okay, I'm going to let you say a few words, Kelly, and then Valerie real quick, and then we're going to go ahead and get to another question.
Donna, here we are about halfway through the debate. We're talking about money and control. That's right. What this issue is about. We haven't talked about children. And parents are crying out all across this state for choices in the public education system. I think we need to provide those options. And, the control needs to be with parents, not with bureaucrats, whether they're in the state or at the local level. It needs to be with the parents. That is what is going to be the best option for our citizens. And we can debate whether it's 82% or 62%. I do hope they fact check these numbers. It's still less. There's going to be more money for everyone, that we can provide a quality education for less money. That's a good thing in my book.
We'll be fact checking. Valerie Wilson.
Kelly is absolutely right. We are spending a lot of time talking about this, but that's exactly what this ballot question is about. This ballot question isn't about charter schools and that's the myth that has been out there, that this is about achievement. We need to have a discussion about achievement in this state. We absolutely do. And that discussion needs to include how we are being funded. You said it earlier, QBE has never been adequately funded. Existing public charter schools have never been funded adequately. That is a discussion that we should have. But we are having this level of discussion around the ballot question because that is what's before voters. That is what they have to make a decision upon. And the thing that is absolutely amazing to me is that the Supreme Court ruling didn't stop the State Board of Education from approving charter schools. They have been approving charter schools since that ruling. So that is still there. That has not gone anywhere. So it almost seems to me that this constitutional amendment is not necessary if we were talking about an alternate authorizer to local boards.
I know you two want to jump in there, but I want to get to our viewers and listeners.
Speaking of the theme of quality and availability of charter schools, a charter parent posted this question. My daughter attends one of those state-approved charter schools. She's thriving. It's been night and day. Can the opposition to this amendment guarantee us that these state-approved charters are not in danger of being closed if this amendment does not pass?
Worry about the current charter schools. Well, let's take that.
Current charter schools will be just as they are now. There's nothing about this Amendment 1 that is going to either approve or do away with a school, except it will create a commission.
Not in the amendment.
By 7 people that the petitioner can go to have their school approved by the Charter School Commission. Now, the state board will have final rights on that if they choose to, but last time there was really no review, and I contend there won't be a review again. Now, the reason, Donna, we talk about money, I've been in this business more than a couple of years. You just look at me and tell that, right? And I know what being about kids are, but you do have to have money. Here we sit today. The QBE funding formula is $1.1 billion less than what the school districts earn. It was that way last year. There's been austerity cuts since FY 2003. Over $6.6 billion has been cut out of the QBE formula that goes to school districts. And let's just take a snapshot of where they are. This is why it's not just money, but 2/3 of the school districts in this state are going to school less than 180 days. They don't have money.
Okay.
Teachers are furloughed.
We've got to let Kelly McCutcheon address this.
Well, let's talk about QBE. That was a formula that was created when I was a senior in high school, 1985. And I think most people agree it has really not been updated since then. It's outdated. That's an imaginary target. Let's look at something in the real world. Let's look at North Carolina, our neighbor. They're graduating 3/4 of their students compared to 2/3 of ours. How much are they spending? Well, they're spending a lot less than we are. If you go back to 2003, the same time the $6 billion number comes from, we've actually spent $13.7 billion more than North Carolina. So I guess we're saying if we spent $19 billion more than North Carolina, everything would be okay? I don't think throwing money at the problem is the solution. And now, this is an effort to distract away perhaps of where the money actually is going. We're spending way too much on bureaucracy at the local level. General administration spending during the Great Recession, 2008 through 2011, has gone up. In Gwinnett County, it went up by 6 times the rate of inflation. When at the same time we're furloughing our teachers. At Tech High, we did not furlough teachers. We found savings in other areas so that we didn't have to.
But if you're furloughing teachers, then how can you justify opening new schools?
Well, Georgia's growing, so we're going to be opening new schools anyway. Over 1,000 students in Gwinnett County in 1 year alone. I will say that I agree with you, Kelly, that, and this certainly isn't the case for some of our lower wealth school systems, but in the metro area, if some of our school systems would simply cut back on central spending, we would have fewer furloughs. And I will say that Georgia spends more per student than every state that it touches and has the highest average teacher salaries of 14 southeastern states. Now, I'd like to give our educators a pay increase because nothing impacts a child's education more than the family, than a teacher. But we're doing the best we can, and it is a distraction because the amount of funding for these charter schools was 1/20th of 1% of the state budget. But yet we spend 45% on K through 12, $7 billion. It wouldn't make a difference. What would make a difference, for example, in Gwinnett County, is if you had simply slashed central office spending, Mr. Wilbanks, and benchmarked it to Cobb County, in which spends 1/2 of what you spend per student, you could have given those teacher step increases that we funded at the state level. You wouldn't have had to have those furloughs, and you could have reduced class sizes by 1. It's not always just about the public charter schools.
I've got to let you answer that.
I appreciate you bringing that up. You've gone all over metropolitan Atlanta saying that. Now, you pulled a figure off of the DOE website, and that is a correct figure
for the charter schools in your district. So it is accurate to say you spend double per student what Cobb County does on central office.
You did one adjustment. You really should do 2 more. Are you aware that there are $22.2 million now in that line that's for employee paid benefits?
That are distributed by the DOE into other categories.
No, they are not. They're in that line that you pull, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. And so let me encourage you to get your figure, check your figures.
Well, it sounds like we're going to have some fact checking after all this. I do want to get into achievement and measurement a little bit on this. I want to talk a little bit. Wouldn't more charter schools help improve a dropout rate that we know in Georgia has suffered?
Donna, there is no definitive research, there isn't it, that says that charter schools do any better than traditional schools overall. Now, certainly some do. The KIPP schools, they do great. They go to school 6 days a week. They fly them to Europe. That's not a transportable model necessarily. But if you look at the rank and file charter schools across this nation, don't take my word for it, look at the Credo study out of Stanford University and others, they will give you definitive information.
I want to show a couple of graphics that we have on this. In the 2010-2011 school year, 70% of charter schools met adequate yearly progress, while 73% of traditional public schools achieved the same threshold. That same year, charter schools saw a graduation rate of 82%, while the state average was 80.9%.
I will say that you're including in that the 46 independent charter schools that were approved by local school boards.
I believe
so. If you take those out and you only use statistics from, I believe it was the 13 that were open, approved by the state, they did have a higher achievement rate. But I have to say, if they had the same, and they didn't, it was higher, I still will always think that it's important as a mother of 4 that, by the way, attend or graduated from traditional public schools, that it's important to give parents and students a choice, because not every student learns the same.
All right, Valerie Wilson.
I just have to say that when you look at the numbers that you just quoted, charter schools in this state don't do that much better, if they do better, when you pull the numbers out, as Speaker Pro Tem has just said. But when you look at what is happening and the social issues that come to school with some of the kids that we have, and you look at the numbers as you are averaging these numbers of how well children are doing, you have to recognize in some ways we are looking at apples and oranges when we do that. But the other thing that I think is really important is we're talking about achievement in the state of Georgia. And I don't know how many of you have seen the latest numbers that's come out of the State Board of Education, where we look at quality counts. And you're looking at what's happening across the state and what's happening with ACT and SAT scores and the NAEP math, science, and reading scores. And you look at where the state of Georgia is. And you look at how students in the state of Georgia are doing with AP courses, scoring 3, 4s, and 5s. And you look at our improvement, steady improvement across the state of Georgia. Georgia ranks 13th in AP scores of 3, 4s, and 5s in this country. African American students in the state of Georgia rank number 2 in this country with 3, 4s, and 5s. Now, is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. And we have work yet to do in this state. But we are not failing our children. We have work to do. But just as you have good public schools, you also have good charter schools. But just as you have bad public schools, you have bad charter schools.
Let's talk about the issue of whether or not you can get those special populations you're talking about, minority students or students in low-income areas, into those. How can you guarantee that those students are going to go to charter schools?
Well, first of all, they're right. The record is mixed for schools that are approved by local school boards. Now, what we're talking about is this amendment. We have a record of 3 years that the commission chartered schools, their academic achievement is superior to the districts where they are in.
What charter?
So that's clear.
We were going to have a commission.
No, the ones we already had the commission that have been approved, their performance is clearly better. That's what we're talking about here. But the gold standard studies have shown that the parties that are significantly improved, African American students, the achievement gap of African American students attending charter schools has been reduced by 1/2 to 2/3. That is very, very significant. Let me tell you about the underserved. Charter schools serve a higher percentage of minority students. They serve about the same percentage of low-income students. Again, looking at the charter schools that were approved by the Charter School Commission in Georgia when it was alive,
and the 15 that still exist.
08 to 11, they served a more disadvantaged student body. They did better results in academic achievement, and they did it for less cost to the taxpayer.
All right, we're going to have to get over to Maureen a little bit so we can hear from our viewers and our listeners.
This comment came to the website, and it's from Delvin Wilson, and this is really directed, I think, to the opponents, I would say. Is there some apprehension by public schools officials that a parallel charter system may become competition for public schools?
Which, Mr. Wilbanks? Or?
Well, I think there will be competition anytime you have schools. If you got a school system and you have high schools, there's competition. My fear is the competition's going to be at the governance level. You're creating a dual school system, and this will be, quote, their schools. Now, the funding, there is no funding mechanism for the state-approved charter schools. They just say, we'll pay for it out of state funds. Well, there's so much dollars that come to the state. This uses a bucket. The bucket's only so big. So out of that bucket has to be paid a lot of things.
Okay, Kelly McCutcheon.
Well, if you're spending less money for a certain group of students, there's going to be more left for everyone else. You know, I wasn't too great in English in school, but I was good in math because I had a great teacher, Tom Ottinger, at Gilmer County High School, and it just doesn't add up. But you know, again, what we're talking about is giving parents the opportunity. No money moves until a parent enrolls their child. And let's talk about what's not changing. What's not changing is local control of local money. That is not changing under this amendment. Elected officials control the tax rates at the local level and the state level. Elected officials control the budgets for all public schools at the local level and the state level. It's set in the law. None of that is changing. The only thing that's changing is more accountability, because we have a state authority that if you do not meet your objectives, they will be shut down, and parents have the ability to move their children. Now, when's the last time you heard of a traditional public school closing down because of a lack of academic achievement? It doesn't happen.
All right, we want to hear more from our viewers and our listeners, so let's go on back over to Maureen Downey.
In the issue of school quality that you have been talking about, Sandy would like to know if the concerns include quality of a child's education along with the cost, then why not give education dollars back to the parent and allow the parent to continue their child in whatever school, public, private, charter, home, or web-based? So I guess the question is really, is the next move from here, if we believe parent choice and the issue of quality, would we be moving to a voucher system from here?
I'll take that. That's a lot of what we're talking about. We're basically giving the money to parents so they have the choice, but we're constraining it to within the public school framework, which I think most Georgians agree with. Certain rules, like you have to take everybody. You can't discriminate. You have to provide special needs children and minority children the same opportunities as anyone else. You have to publish your test scores. You have to give the same test scores. You have to have open meetings and open records and transparency. All of those rules I think Georgians support. They're public in every sense of the way, but we're giving parents the choice within those options.
And this is going fast. We're running out of time. Valerie Wilson.
Be very clear. This is vouchers is the next battle that will be here. Be very, very clear about that. We're talking about charter schools right now and who authorizes them. But the next battle will be vouchers. I anticipate that coming, if not next year, within a couple of years. So it will be the next item that we will be dealing with as it relates to this issue.
I have to say that I think that allowing parents more options within the public school framework absolutely doesn't mean we're going to vouchers. 32 other states do this now. Many blue and red states, almost an equal number. In fact, Illinois passed the bill that was struck down, the same legislation last year. And so I don't think that Illinois thinks that allowing the state to authorize public charter schools is leading to vouchers. I'm sorry, I think that's more scaremongering so that parents will be afraid that they won't have robust public schools, and the alternative is vouchers, and that's just simply not the case.
Okay, Superintendent
Well, it actually gets back to the ballot language. It's very misleading. If they had just said what they wanted to do, then it would have been far better than, see, the ballot language now, there's nothing that you can't do that this amendment will give you, except you'll convert the approval to a commission of 7 people.
We've got good discussion here, good passion, but we're running out of time and we've got to start wrapping up. We have to keep the discussion moving a little bit, and this actually concludes our forum part of this, the discussion part where the panelists, you will now have. Oh, we're going to get to innovation regulation. They're telling me we have more time than I thought we had. I'm sorry. We're going to talk a little bit about innovation and regulation. And one of the questions I had was that in terms of the pro side, isn't there another way to improve education in Georgia without charters?
I think we have to be open to many opportunities and many options. Since I've been in the legislature, we gave parents, not systems and superintendents, the ability to decide if their high school students want to take dual enrollment classes, and the state fully pays for that. That's one option. And to be perfectly honest, the education associations fought letting parents make that decision. Number two, the state has created 120 virtual classes, and again, we've empowered parents and students to decide if they want to take those virtual classes, because we have school systems with 199 students. Not all classes can be offered within attendance lines. I agree that we need many options and many opportunities. This is simply one, and it's gotten a lot of attention because we had the state's authority jeopardized and eliminated through a lawsuit.
And Superintendent Wilbanks? Or Valerie Wilson, did you want to comment on that? If not, if charter schools...
Can I say something? I think that absolutely. I've been to a charter school in Gwinnett County, Gwinnett School for Math and Science, one of the best schools I've ever seen. You know, it can be done, and that's the best way to do it when you have adults working together. Unfortunately, it doesn't always happen.
Yeah. If charter schools are able to truly try innovation, why isn't it a good idea to have a commission or a board to approve and oversee charters much the same way that the local school boards do?
There's no need for it. And again, it sets up a dual school system. It sets up expands state government. There's no need for it. You can do now exactly what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Donna, have you ever heard of the statement, you can't fight City Hall? Well, there's a reason for that statement. Some school boards are very receptive, but we have some that aren't functioning very well and some that aren't doing a very good job. And a parent may not have the influence or the power or the connections to get their child what they need. And in those situations, we need that safety valve, that appeal to a professional independent board at the state level. So petty politics and local politics don't come into it. To give those parents those opportunities. That's all we're asking for.
And I want to go back and just say this whole question around choice. There exists choice in the state of Georgia already. There is choice with parents can choose charter schools, parents can choose private schools, parents can choose homeschooling, parents can move kids around within districts if they'd like to. Parents have choices that they can make currently. And I want to just kind of go back and answer a couple of things or just make a couple of comments.
Running out of time, so make it real short.
Okay. When we talk about a growing state, Decatur City Schools is growing. It's the fastest growing system in the state of Georgia. I needed to say that. My parents know that because we're experiencing that right now. We're already trying to decide where we're going to put these kids. We're going to have to build buildings for these kids, and we're going to have to raise property taxes if the cuts continue to come from the state.
Okay, we've got to get to those concluding statements I tried to get in earlier. That concludes the discussion portion of this forum. Each of the panelists will now have 30 seconds to share some final thoughts, and Alvin Wilbanks was randomly selected to give the first statement.
Thank you. The thing that we must remember is that Amendment 1 is not about charter schools, but it's about who authorizes them. It's also about what this allows, and I think you only have to look at other states. If you just look at who's funding the pro-charter campaign, it's EMOs and EMOs from out of state. K-12, $100,000, academia, $50,000.
I'm sorry, it's time. Kelly McCutcheon.
Not everybody can afford to go to a private school or to move into a better school district. Our parents need choice. What we're doing in approving this amendment is going back to what we already had in 2008 through 2011, which did a wonderful job. The hardest thing I've ever had to do was to look a mother in the face and tell her that our school was closing. She had tears in her eyes and she knew that our other options were not any good. If you're thinking about voting no on this amendment, put yourself in front of that mom and tell her that, no, we don't believe you should have another public school option.
All right, your 30 seconds, Valerie Wilson.
This amendment is not about charter schools. This amendment is about creating dual government, expanding government, and creating an entity that will do exactly what we have two systems already in place to do. What really needs to happen in the state of Georgia is charter schools and public schools need to come together and demand of our state legislator to adequately fund public education in the state of Georgia.
All right, thank you very much. Jan Jones.
Thank you. As a Georgian, I want our young people to have more opportunities, not fewer, to succeed and achieve the American dream. As a mother of 4 that attend currently or graduated from traditional schools, I realize that every child doesn't learn the same. Only 2% of students in Georgia have the opportunity to have an option at a public charter school. What the amendment will do is allow local communities to come in and parents and open their own charter schools through nonprofits.
All right, thank you. A lot of passion here. That concludes the Charter School Amendment Forum. We'd like to remind voters that the general election will be Tuesday, November 6th, and early voting is already underway across the state. Our thanks to Maureen Downey and the panel here. We'd also like to thank the Atlanta Press Club for arranging today's debate. And for more information about Atlanta Press Club, you may visit theatlantapressclub.org. The debates that air on Georgia Public Broadcasting will be archived on the Press Club's website. This broadcast has been streamed and will be available on demand on GPB's website, gpb.org. I'm Donna Lowry. Thanks for joining us for the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young debate series. Don't forget to vote on November 6th. Good night.
GPB reminds you to vote in the general election on Tuesday, November 6th.
This is a GPB original production.